Welcome to Getting Real with Real Estate with Danielle Kempf and Jim Kempf, St. Louis's favorite father-daughter real estate team. Your source of real estate information in the greater St. Louis area.
We're rolling?
We're rolling.
All right, we're rolling. Well, welcome to the podcast, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello to our listeners in Europe.
Yes. A few over there.
Yep, we got a great guest with us today. We're excited to have Brendin Loveland with Loveland Home Solutions here today. Thanks for coming
Thanks
in,
for
man.
coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Sneaking us in your busy schedule. We do appreciate that. We're going to talk a little electricity today.
Yeah.
Because Brendin is the master of all things electrical. And but we got to start off with a joke, right?
And it's electrical themed.
So Danielle, take it away.
Okay. So where do light bulbs go shopping?
Where?
The outlet store.
Of course, yeah. Of course.
Of course they do.
That's a good one. All right. Well, hey, Brendin, if you would, man, tell us a little bit about Loveland Home Solutions. Kind of, the little history and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Brendin Loveland. The company's called Loveland Home Solutions. We're a residential electric company here in St. Louis. My grandfather started the business. He's been doing electric in the St. Louis area for about 50 years. Wow. He started in the Navy. He was trained as an electrician on atomic submarines. That's where he started.
Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
Came home, got his master's license, and has been an electrician ever since.
Wow.
I joined up with him about 7 years ago.
Okay.
We spent a couple of years of just him and I, where he trained me pretty intensely, and then we decided to partner up and grow the business. And since then, we've built it up so that we've got about 10 technicians, and we're able to help a lot of our community here in St. Louis.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
good. You guys are based in the St. Charles area, right?
So
you work everywhere in St. Louis, right?
Yeah, exactly. So our biggest market is definitely St. Charles, but we'll service the entire greater St. Louis area. So anywhere from Edwardsville, Illinois to Troy, and everywhere in between. So.
Cool.
I think we've ran into one of your trucks. Well, not ran into. I think we've seen one of your trucks before down in Soulard.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about running.
Yeah, running, no.
Just had an accident
really?
a week or two ago. So we don't want to talk about running into stuff.
No, we saw.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just kind of start off with just some basic general questions. Why don't you take the first one?
That first one there?
Yeah, like when we're out like showing homes and stuff, we kind of look at electrical panels and stuff to try to tell as best we can. Yeah. Right? Ask the first question there.
Yeah, thank you for teeing it on up.
Yeah, well,
You could have just went with it. But no, Brendin, how do you determine the size and rating of a panel for the home?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways to determine that.
Mm-hmm.
One very obvious way is looking at the main breaker.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's a lot of times that'll be just kind of spelled out for you.
Yeah.
Another way is going to be the size of the cable coming into the house.
Okay.
For instance, a 100 amp service has a service line that's literally half the size of a 200 amp service. Okay.
Makes sense.
A 60 amp service is much less common, so the house would have to be pretty darn old for it to have a 60 amp service. So for generally speaking, you're going to be looking at between 100, 200, or even 400 on a much larger house. You could have two 200 amp panels, which is serviced by what's called a 320 continuous meter base. And that's going to be a pretty hunkin' big meter base.
Wow, cool. Okay. Yeah, we have seen that actually in some lot bigger. I have a couple times in bigger home. Two 200 amp panel. That's a lot of juice flowing through.
Yeah, it is.
So, right on. All right, cool. Main shutoffs. You mentioned like most panels, as I understand it, right, should have a main shutoff, right? Just boom, one, and it kills the whole thing. But sometimes we don't see those on a panel. Is that bad, and sometimes we've talked about this before. They're outside. What's kind of?
Yeah. So main shutoff. So it became code compliant to have a main shutoff on your main panel. Many years ago at this point, and they want you to be able to shut off the whole panel if you've got an issue with arcing within the panel. It won't necessarily. If you've got a huge arcing problem in the panel, shutting off that one breaker might not necessarily stop that problem. So it's good to have a main shutoff.
Yep.
Now they're requiring, in addition to that, you need a main disconnect on the outside of the home.
Okay.
And I believe the main purpose of that is for, EMS, any kind of like fireman,
fire,
things like that. So they've got a really easy way to turn off your panel.
Instead of having to go down into the basement
Exactly.
to do it.
So they don't have to look for it anymore. It's outside. They can identify where that service is, turn it off right away. It also makes it a lot easier to operate on the main panel to service. We can turn it off from the outside. We know all the electricity is dead from the main panel, and it creates a safer environment.
Cool. Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, like when we with our clients, we see a lot of common inspection issues, right?
Yeah.
We see things, like ungrounded outlets seem to be popular, GFCIs, or
lack thereof.
Yeah.
And kind of, if you would, kind of talk about a little bit about that. Is an ungrounded outlet, I mean, it's pretty common, but what does that really mean to somebody?
So, ungrounded means literally that you don't have a wire that's going straight to the ground potential. Okay. What that ground does is create a path of least resistance, as opposed to you being that path of least resistance for the electrical current. Okay. So it helps with. It also helps open up the breaker, so it creates that grounding path that allows the breaker to open up more easily.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So as far as inspections go, when you've got ungrounded receptacles throughout the house, what you don't want is 3-prong receptacles that are ungrounded.
You'll see those all the time.
You'll see them all the time. So it is still legal to have a 2-prong outlet in an ungrounded system, because you're not giving the false implication that it is grounded.
Gotcha.
Okay. You're also, via the code, allowed to install GFCIs in an ungrounded scenario. Because it's got that shock,
instant shut off kind of thing.
Exactly. So if you've got a house where you've got a fully ungrounded system, and you just want some 3-prong outlets for convenience, and if it's for convenience and not necessarily for protection, then it's okay to install a GFCI receptacle. If you're looking for something like if you're setting up an office somewhere, you probably want a real ground path, because it's going to help
protects
that breaker.
the equipment and stuff too, right? Kind of.
Exactly.
I mean, like if you got the stereo, TV, office equipment, all that stuff, that would help.
Yeah, because if there's a problem, that breaker's more likely to trip with that grounding path.
Okay.
And then obviously you want that in the kitchen on the counters and the bathrooms by water.
Yeah. So the GFI protection is going to protect you again, and it'll detect the current going through the circuit, and if there's a difference there, it'll trip, right?
Yeah.
And that difference would be you getting shocked. Okay. The electricity's going through you instead of back into that device, so it can detect that. I think it's something within a milliamp or something, and it'll trip right away. So if it's functioning correctly, so anywhere with water, you're more likely to become that conduit for the electricity. Anywhere outdoors, and then anywhere with a concrete floor. So if you're barefoot plugging things in your basement, you're likely to become that conduit.
That makes sense.
Same with garages too, I imagine.
Exactly. Yep. And
now we know why.
Now becoming code that all basements, whether or not you have finished flooring or anything, have to have GFI protection throughout the whole thing.
Okay. In a case like that, could you put a GFCI breaker? Is there such a thing? That would protect a whole circuit of outlets? Is that the easiest way to do it, possibly?
So depending on they're pretty expensive. It depends how many outlets are on that circuit. If you've just got one outlet in the basement, it might just be beneficial to do the one.
Right.
But if you're talking, a finished basement with 5 or 6 outlets in a room, then going the route of that breaker is a good idea.
Cool. Okay. Extension cords. We see a lot of that stuff. Like we saw one not too long ago. It was kind of used to power a refrigerator. I guess they didn't have most of them have an outlet right behind the fridge. Somebody had kind of
it was looped
draped over behind the counter, sort of. We see that on garage door openers, and then of course the dreaded space heaters. People use them for stuff like that. I mean,
So there are a few reasons why you shouldn't. So over an extended period, extension cords are not meant for a permanent wiring situation, right?
Yeah.
So they're not rated for a permanent wiring situation. So over time, it can create an actual electrical hazard. Okay. But in addition to that, the reason the code has spacing for receptacles residentially is so you don't use extension cords, because a lot of it's a tripping hazard.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that too. Okay.
And then
that.
also in a kitchen, they don't want you to use an extension cord, because you're more likely to pull things off of the countertop. You know, kids are more likely to reach up and grab that crock pot or whatever else through the cord. The code is designed to minimize the use of extension cords. And yeah, if you get an inspection where you've got the garage door or anything.
That seems to be like the most common, because they go, they're plugged into the wall and then they go up and then across a couple rafters.
Yeah. And so the reason that's not allowed is because it's not rated for an extended period of use.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right on.
I'm guilty.
Yeah. so we do a lot of older houses.
We do, yeah.
Like,
and those homes were built with knob and tube back then. Prior to when?
I don't know when that stopped, but I know like we just recently had one built in the 1930s, and that had knob and tube wiring.
Yeah.
I called you about that one the other week, right?
Yeah,
so we talked a little bit about that. A lot. I know it's just old for one.
Yep.
Is it kind of? I don't know what the word is, but is it bad? Is it kind of, what are some of the things you want to look for or pay attention to, I guess, if you have some in your home, or should you just get rid of it? Any thoughts on that, you think?
Yeah. So insurance is getting more and more crazy about it. So that's probably not going to go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair.
So I'd say getting rid of it is a good option.
Best,
okay. As far as safety goes, yes, it's old. They wrap the wire in cloth back then. In many cases, this cloth is completely deteriorated. So, especially in areas where it's exposed, often in an attic or basement, it's a major shocking hazard.
Right.
Okay, so there's nothing protecting you from that wire. So those are the two main issues I have with it. Shocking hazard. It's old. It's unprotected. And insurance is going nuts about it. So.
And I've seen like where people kind of splice into that and just put a little bit of tape on it or something. I've seen stuff like that. Obviously, that's an obvious kind of danger, I would assume, or it's kind of a
it's not,
you shouldn't probably do.
Not current code by any
means.
So
not code compliant.
You used to be able to, and sometimes it's done pretty nicely, where they would actually like fuse the wires together, solder them, and then tape around them. But now, for any kind of junction, you want a fire retardant box around that connection and the wiring. So, that's an added new safety feature that's based around fire protection. So.
Okay.
And then how extensive is it? You mentioned just replacing it. How extensive of a job is that?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on the size of the house. It depends on how many stories you have for accessibility. Do you have a finished basement? Do we have an attic space that's usable? Or do you have a flat roof where we don't really have an attic space? Most of these houses are still plastered. So it is typically a pretty extensive job. So you're dealing with a fair bit of plaster removal. Obviously all our new wiring going in, and then you've got to have someone come back and patch up that plaster, or replace it with drywall if you just want to go that extra mile. But it's definitely it's a big undertaking.
That is. I mean, that probably, like if somebody did just like a gut rehab, that's obviously your best opportunity to just rewire the whole place and be
exactly. And it gets less complicated in like a ranch style home where I've got an open basement and attic access. So that's the easiest,
the ideal customer.
The ideal the rewire situation.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
And then moving on to more newer panels like Federal Pacific. They're older, but newer than knob and tube.
They're older now, they're older now. That and like the Zinsco, I guess, the one that I've seen. I've always was told if it's got the kind of pastel-y looking breakers, that's maybe.
Yeah, they're multicolored.
Yep,
Yeah.
like
If
reds and blues are kind of old. And
red and blues.
Yeah.
If you've got turquoise colored breakers, those are definitely Zinsco.
Okay.
Federal Pacific, the breakers are black with a red label. And they're usually very clearly labeled. So you'll be able to identify if you have one of these.
Yep.
But these are pretty major safety concerns. You can look it up online. There's been
pretty well
hundreds of
documented.
cases of these causing fires.
Yeah.
And what happens is that the breakers will not trip when there is a fault in the circuit.
Okay.
So that fault will just keep on burning up.
And it
And then it,
obvious fire.
Yeah.
Right there, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
wow. Okay.
So yeah, it's a
That's a
major
pretty
problem.
serious
Yeah.
one
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
The last
I've seen quite
house,
a few of them actually burnt up. So.
the last inspection I did for a buyer had a Federal Pacific, and that was one of the first things that he's like, that's the first thing I'm going to change when I move in.
Got it.
So,
Yeah.
Good job. Good job.
Yep. Those Federal Pacifics, those types of panels and space heaters are going to be your biggest fire starter.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Also space heaters you want to stay away from, or have an electrician run a dedicated line for a space heater, or
sense.
even those heat producing electric fireplaces.
Yeah.
Those are essentially space heaters, so you don't want to just plug that into the wall and hope for the best. Because you can damage the wiring pretty.
Yeah,
pretty
folks
bad.
need to use some common sense, right? When they do that stuff, you don't plug a lot of the stuff in. You got to be careful. Take kind of consideration of what you have in your house. If you've got old wiring or whatever, be extra careful.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure. Okay. I guess kind of the last thing I was gonna just ask you. We see it sometimes in after an inspector, like a building inspector will take the panel cover off and they look inside and they'll find like some rust or some evidence of moisture and stuff, and obviously electric and water don't mix.
Right.
How does that even typically, how does water even get into a panel, and what kind of problems does that cause?
Yeah, so most of the time it comes in actually through the service entry cable.
Okay.
Whether it's coming in from on the outside of the service entry cable, like just flowing along it, or it sometimes you'll get water going into your meter base, and then it'll actually get inside that wire, that service entry cable, and drip into the panel.
Okay.
So if you notice moisture around your panel, definitely have someone come in and check it out. Right. Over time, it definitely can create some problems. And the major problem it's going to cause with corrosion is with any electrical conductor, you want a tight connection, okay? And when those connections become loose, you'll have arcing. So the electricity will jump between those metal conductors because there's space between them.
I gotcha.
And that's what starts fires.
Gotcha.
So over a period of time, that with the water damage, those conductors will rust, creating space, creating arcing, which is a potential hazard.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Okay. Cool.
All right. And then we recently just had some buyers who had concerns about aluminum wiring. Can you kind of talk a little bit further about that one?
Yeah. So aluminum wiring is becoming another major issue, similar to knob and tube, where insurance is starting to catch on and go nuts about it. It was a cheaper material that was used for about 10 years, all throughout the United States, and it's just not as sturdy of a product as copper. And back to this arcing, you'll get a lot of loose connections because over time things break. It's a more malleable metal, so you'll just, like I said, get loose connections, and then it also oxidizes, which is a type of corrosion similar to rust, but it's different. And if it's not properly managed, when you combine aluminum with other metals, like the metals on your standard receptacles and switches and everything else, it'll corrode over time, it'll oxidize, creating an arcing problem.
Gotcha.
So there are a couple ways there to take care of it. One's obviously rewiring, getting rid of it. That'd be your permanent solution.
Right.
The other way is you can install aluminum rated receptacles or switches in your house.
Okay.
They also make connections called lumicons that have a dioxide paste inside them, and they're specially rated for that aluminum to copper connection. So you can make a jumper and then connects to things like a light fixture or something else that is not going to have the right metal terminal to connect to.
Wow, okay, cool. So there are some ways around it.
There are a couple ways around it.
It's just be careful. Again, I guess the message is be careful, right?
Right.
I mean, you
so
kind of have to.
If you've got aluminum wiring, definitely have an electrician come and see if that remediation has been done to where it's been made to be safer.
Yep.
And then know when that's been done, because that's definitely not a permanent fix.
Okay.
Cool.
So,
all right, awesome. So a question I had for you too was, like, I've been confused before, like, so, you know, when a service comes in from the, like in my case, in my house, from the telephone pole or from underground, right, comes over, connects to your house, drops down, I guess, to where your electric meter is, and then goes in your house. So what happens, like, branch falls, hits the line, pulls that off your house? What are you responsible for as a homeowner? And what is the, like, Ameren typically cover, I guess, if you will, in situations like that? Or
yeah, sure. So you have a service entry line, right? Okay, and then you've got a point of attachment. Okay. And the point of attachment is where Ameren's line physically connects to the home. Okay. It's what's supporting Ameren's line.
Okay.
Right below that point of attachment, there's going to be a little loop in the wire, and where there's a junction there between the wire going into the home to the wire going out to Ameren's service pole. From that little junction and back towards the house, everything there is the homeowner's responsibility.
Okay.
So it's always so to determine what's yours, it's a good starting point to see where's that point of attachment.
Okay.
It's Ameren's meter, but it's your meter base. So you can't touch the meter, but what the meter sits in is the homeowner's responsibility to keep that up to date. So, cool. And in many cases, to replace a panel and to pull the permits for that and to pass that permit, that inspection, you have to bring the outside up to code too. So in many cases, if you're considering replacing your panel, you're gonna have to factor in also replacing everything on the outside.
The new meter base is what that's called.
New meter base. It may not be high enough anymore.
Yeah, I've had that situation.
That's it's really common where the older service is now too low for current code. So yeah, if you're looking at replacing, definitely see if your service is above ground or underground. If it's above ground, you're almost definitely going to have to change it out as well.
Cool. Okay, awesome.
And then question for you on the lines. Like, so we had a situation where there was a back deck and then the line was drooping, and not that you could reach it, but someone could reach it. Is that Ameren's responsibility or the homeowner's?
That's kind of case by case.
Okay.
So if it's drooping, if the point of attachment at the house is high enough and it's still drooping too low anyways, that would be an Ameren fix.
Okay.
If the point of attachment on the house is not high enough and that's what's causing it to be too low, that would probably fall on the homeowner to fix that.
Okay. Cool. All right. I guess so. Obviously nowadays with all the electric vehicles that are coming around, I'm sure you're putting in a lot of electric car chargers, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that process. What do you have to think about if you're going to go out and buy that new Tesla, right? You gotta have enough juice in the garage to charge it, right?
Definitely something to consider before you buy the car. So first of all, you want to look at the size of your service. So if you're only at 100 amps, you've already got, an electric range, your dryer's already electric, maybe your water heater's electric. Okay, well, you might be pushing it to have that electric car charger installed.
Right, makes sense.
So size of the service, how much power you've actually got, then do you have literally, do you have space for 2 new spots? So a 2-pole breaker,
okay.
2 4-8 circuit.
Yeah.
So do you have 2 spots in your panel, even if you have enough juice coming into that panel?
Makes sense.
A lot of times people don't. Then just have no idea. Okay, now we've got to install either a sub panel next to the panel, or we can give you a bigger panel.
Wow.
But and then the circuit you've got to consider. So how far away is your panel from the garage?
How do you get it there?
So how do we get it there? So is your basement finished?
Yep.
If you've got a drop ceiling in the basement, that's great for us. We can get to that garage most of the time.
Yep.
But if you've got a drywall finished basement, there are cases where we can run up into the attic and across to the garage and drop down. But sometimes we have to get a little creative. If you've got a big house and it's all finished and the panel's on one side, garage is on the other, which does happen pretty often.
Sure.
So, all of that are factors into pricing as far as what it's going to take to get you that charger.
They probably don't tell you that at the Tesla dealer.
No.
Not that I'm digging on Tesla, but I'm just saying. Okay, cool, man. Well,
any other questions you want though?
I do want to ask you one, just a quick one, and then we'll get things wrapped up. But you had mentioned, we talked one time about surge protectors, and what's the importance of that, and kind of how that works to help protect your home.
Yeah, so it's something that's coming into play as a requirement for the code. So 2024's code requirements are that you have a surge protector on newly installed services. What it does is it's attached to your main panel, and it will absorb a surge coming from a nearby lightning strike or the power company.
Oh, wow.
It will not protect you from a direct lightning strike.
Okay.
Pretty much nothing.
Makes sense.
But it's a really good measure of protection for not only just your all the wiring that goes throughout the house, but anything with a microchip. We've had customers with, lightning hit a tree in their yard, and half of their electronic devices are just gone.
Fried,
and that's microwaves, it's electric ranges, it's pretty much everything in your house with electric has a microchip. So they're not terribly expensive, and it's a really, really nice layer of protection.
Good. Okay, cool. All right, well, I think Bob probably ought to wrap it up, right?
Yeah.
So, Brendin, first of all, man, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
you shared a lot of really good information. So, to our listeners, right, if you need any electrical services around your house, man, Loveland Home Solution is the place to call. Talk to Brendin. LovelandHomeSolutions.com is the website?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. You can go there or give us a call and we will put you in direct contact with Brendin.
Absolutely.
So we'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening.
Right on.
We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brennan.
You've been listening to Getting Real with Real Estate with the Kemp team. Have questions about real estate or something you'd like to discuss? Contact the Kemp team at 314-336-1926 or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Kemp Team. Don't want to miss any episodes? Follow us on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. The Kemp Team. Real, honest real estate.